Doldangs, belurbelaw doldangs se malungil tutaw. Ang truy ma algab singil ong emil buil, kada mamura press conference rigid. Wa isil ngaraw ali labak se luwak se kada mral bedulu dia kati dul turak lisi kadul tuira ulo kada wila lubak Dios. With that tebok nga olgayong sanga pastor balgu sandario bol open at press conference lobang lungu.
Ubu Dios ngarang lagi mem dam el tutau ye malol dang sergam renga sulen. Mal masaura leo el tigre ngal giram rabek el sils. Radir mal mol mlam qador gamam el melmut el al sils. Ari ang alela belumam alela president gamam vice president cabinet sete dam Dios el wol um qador ang ilur el girela belumam. El tutadam Dios agi otor samam ngarol imam olngit qasial el tem mal tigre ngal bolong tigai Olorer se los aklar beklad de bolomu lo tial press conference al tuta lo ba malmal terreng maungireng ilmru lo brau do yor mo kire la tartege la bluma mar adal kiel ngar al sen merenga sulem di blo lo nito pase ge rogun mum saud to el al sils wal qawad al moran dir adal rings mar adal dimla rings por rings bol diar ndir el mila ni kira bluri merenga sulem di blo lo si tal time ngarang pela Jesus Kristus os balam Amen.
Malam duta man sulang Pastor Sandario, selung lu agumra lo hace cotelia del valle, donde sirve el tuta rubak al Dios. El guía agumra lo hace ula al silse kada katmokla tial el campak tergid, hace el nomiti gai geri rabek al silse la banget, tial timergid el tiramlet magalurior. المغت بكرة ولير من وهذا السؤال دي مو هايلايت ترى هذا هذا تيال ريدر رقم باكت لو مجد لا توتاو of course أكيد أمنا سا minister كده minister finance غايا chief negotiator أكيد ونورا تيال ولير غاريا تيمينين غار بلاو إدري كمنا تيمينين غار of island من ما بعمو لو مجد غار بيتارن غار روبا ngal bitang ngal ruba kang klela Jeff Farrow sumu kadwa sen tokara ka kampak tengyala sel tiaru mengia koter kamangala arek siringi lo mengila tokara kampak sera ngomong nga sera time al staff for President Carter engia koter milsada tokara kampak alia President Carter late 70s emrogo en adar bela amal mlom danglir sera staff ra chairman delugo era ukhatemela akampak of course enga dongli rubagal matatal el orior qablement trablu amrigel idrangar olbi leselu kulbol president democrat ukmura white house mora mgela President Clinton right and then of course Obama administration not too much no
I declined that.
Oh, he declined. Oh, that time you were already private. Yes. And then, ang katamral ngal tanga tersel ngia aklo aklo ngeri ngira ngaramol me. Yeser uk mla ul swil mergi tersera uk 2009. I guess it would have been 2009. Ngulura mgla president toribio ngara uk negotiation tersel lomregal compact. Naria akla ngeri ngir at the time. Magada sera dulu aurora kada senggira ngaria timerigi del sel magalora miguel ngaria wil cloud ngerti di sel lobang karuba kada kadilingi ngaria timelingin ngara Washington DC sel kombalil law firm el Aiken Gump etrige of course ege law firm ra DC ngaria arbek pagil ara adal ngari lorior el mostly al sumat هذا لو لما جدت هذا تملي هذا سلوك قلت تبلو البلان على Republicans or Democrats for example الترام أصلاً وسيرجي del سيل دورا واشنطن دورا congressmen or senators قال من former chairman of foreign affairs a house white تريجي del هذا دولو سبير تيرم تلمو قايل أسيمر من نوسيد استات المغلدورا other olbira bluram rigel especially Senate ma house matira mo dura President Biden el malasam el sel mle gotron tidro ase gotru le tiada kada tagayani egirel mongot angel adal dulo angel mga katamral di mereka sulel sel uk ya ngilung ngima tigel ok bangel ngara blura merigel wala li selurio sa ya uk ka mek introduction kal el imora dilo bangel nga Lauren Henry como se conversación kala okora be ser ngal dir giler dira blur belau ningam le loera housel were you here for what 4 years yeah 4 years ngilo abar mga bar dira belau sera boda kotru obis engay amle first legal counsel yid mangulura la mga dele rura di dirigam noria uriol ngilura blura mrigel mga Chief Legal Counselor Seattle City Council. Lui aradra la loro lo ngare ungel di tara dulungi tinga se oi kamaral mortial besel ngran di la kamo besa kamo magios pero gal lo malmitel ure dra compact. Mauleng malmal lo mangede en artial al silsile tira dra ure lam tinga se mertial men sorgi lo malmitel ure tara yel gotro godal da le clorur al blada al bangari. Adiregal lobongya dala alsilsa ngania terun mgia kala ada lobongya la minister kome sanga Lindsay Timaro kome adim dala Lindsay ngadire kala kala kwa mending kadmal mrenga sule lukle le mesergi nga of course nga presenter PIDB diregal chair a Kofa Trust Fund kada mrenga sule partner tial negotiating team rid kami amda director PGST ngamal to kawungel director PGST ndi diregal gamla la aurora compactra uktial negotiation o magela foreman administration o magel maral meng kaman menga sulel one of the things that I was sharing with our leader Elia kasi sera temela present ng amoral president mga compactra 1994 nga chief negotiator Udoy amle atal sel compact transition committee ya Udoy amle chair sel committee muklo tutela da tutira migrela adal part traigal uro makmal men ngasulela chief negotiator le inbor ba to kon migrela le kama mong expire o udok mo latar umrael di sel knowledge sel of course president na kamuram lamra ra drongolet hindi ka tamaram nga sulele minister sel na talo lukpilskit sel time I think we gedel kadabul all shell om terabek ladel kada ay geluk da di silu bersay amle sadru kasi makrata nga med improve relal dorur tial pesel agreement or pag singal minister ang rabitang mga tulo lo besering ingamal kaya kanila mga mal kadamre nga sulel diregal 2010 makamla involved rin so ay gigidal cloud ng tira raigal kakarusel agreement bla involved rin help rin mo mlesedel altmage oro lo magira blu amrigel kumralo asesel hotel Nakau tutrel suadal mga taklin mga blura amrigel uro lom tira say agire lungi amrigel agire lungi rebelaw dekal siul uktio makpitang kata kay nga sew kata makal alim partners regal uro giral tabsula uro dekal siul di masakamal labu la songoreng la kamusukumam musuya blur bela lomakas gida de kadolita metara kadolita sel girel blingelet ile gida ukngani ado malum sa abluram regel kada menenga sulit trial ngartiar el alsil bay mestriate al ngartiang mongbosebil kamera dra media logera full details raiger rogul questioner kami el girela tial compact rit akti mereka sudah ada belau ara kamral biskit memlesi ada order tial order ada mereka sudah ada olbil gimle betokol gibor olbil wase we need manil gut maklitiam et mal lemre adro tebawdo wase tial team agirel fully funded agirel al hire adal si dule awrior gut makli seguida habló lo logora ministerio wase la como mesel tial expense mo mesel tial el ngesol al motabdi el girel la compact review el investment because ingirel dro mesel il waise mangada kada merenga asulire ngarea tokol dilia Mr. Special Envoy Unirelli wase kadamal suada mesa ratification olbira kalulaw as we know in 2010 and dimlaga ratification olbira kalulaw ara compact because hindi kal required hindi ngungil tokoy serli ilangongil siyasingin mo ablo amrigel wase oy kidar adar belaw uldu bertial uldaso et magal el tianga bladesang kadam lagut makli way kamil adar amrigel makama magidire kal oy ngari ileng ngoti sel klisi ala del willeri magadamal hopefully egal information el blad release really e hotel sokal merenga sulera adara olbil el nosa era elira 11 o'clock e kadamitra amayong allí a mal me nota y dice delegates el marset temle 15 el delegates y dimle dibo busa imol delegate el delegate trangarolong aleng en mlaringa al sungol mumlo of island ding mral full house el leptoka karir aktir kan menga sulela senator inapol tera senate ma senator whips el marse luk mesi lo kera igel gel cloud to tera la boni wil clouding ertir ura bodo initial igal document ma eling miro sa babil mortir mo ministry babil ngir ediregal qadra rasem laria imora uk meeting ertilom tira rumugul belar sigil 11 o'clock ra tutaw mumlo ya tige uk laria committee meeting ertilom tira rumugul belar uk kiran msada tokora shugang mundim lagal si ilmei di sel cloud to tira la mungila cloud ngir gidel adar belar rogui tial uk tial ramidiar elanga asel mutel meski mate almo como gera igel koma gai hofla minister mar adalang artial si ilsma drogo ano ise ya bai namo oi open aula le bai de la discussion sila
come Marimba que was president 11:30 I know there were mentioned mlaringi ako ra summary regal ngatel agreement and the sabel just sorry to repeat again to highlight tamal sa mamal other than sila MOU akimula kapil niya
como lang kapir MOU
yeah
okay
Thank you, Lay. I asked Minister Matul to back me up if there's anything he thinks needs to be explained in a different way, maybe in Palawan. Let me first start with the sequence of this process. As you know, the negotiations actually started 3 years ago under the previous administration. We took over from that point, and we felt that it was short of what Palau needed. So we positioned ourselves differently and said that this was unacceptable and we need to revisit this. At the same time, we built our advisory team and we started putting our information together, our request. After the U.S. selected their special presidential envoy, Mr. Ambassador Yun, to lead their team, we held our first meeting. It was a rocky start, but we were able to express our positions and see how far apart we were. Then we took it from there and started refining our package that we wanted to work on. It's important to note that there is a timing issue. For Palau especially, we are from the pandemic and the decline in tourism before the pandemic, we were in a place where we were starting to borrow money and at the same time use our whatever reserves we had built up since 2015 The U.S. recognized that that was a key issue for us, what Ambassador Yun calls short-term liquidity. We also are looking for our long-term prospects as a country to build and be more self-reliant and independent of these economic and climate change shocks. The U.S. recognized that, but in order for us to address the short-term liquidity, we decided that we would do an MOU that talks about what we had negotiated up to that point, which was the financial package. And the financial package focuses on the assistance that would help us get towards where we would like to be in 20 years. But one of the key features of what we did was to allow us to receive a financial package 1 year early. And that's why we signed the MOU. And the MOU was specifically for the purpose of allowing President Biden to submit numbers to Congress. So we are already in Congress with a budget amount to support our package. From there, we continue to work on specific language and other items like federal programs and services, both inside the negotiation and outside with the U.S. government and with the U.S. Congress. Since then, sometimes remotely, sometimes in person, and we were able to start working on the specific language that would be used to eventually draft a bill that will go to Congress. And once that is approved and signed by President Biden, the main part of the negotiation is done. We still have a bit more negotiating to do on specifics like certain federal programs and other things that we would like to see. But the main part of the compact, the financial package, economic assistance, has been negotiated. And I think in terms of comparison of where we were and where we are in a much better position now. So yesterday, as the President said, we briefed Congress on a little bit more detail of the agreement. And that agreement that we briefed on, the language was actually worked on until the night before. So things are happening very quickly, and there's a reason for that. But this is the document that we briefed the OAK on, and what I initialed with Ambassador Yun at 4 p.m. yesterday, or a little after 4 p.m. The initialing was significant. We were able to do that symbolically in Palau, which is very significant. And the importance of initialing is that there are still some procedures to go through on the U.S. side before Ambassador Yun can sign. Those are still pending. We expect that those approvals will be received by the time we go to Port Moresby in Papua New Guinea, and then we will be able to sign the document. So because this is still a work in progress, we are not releasing specific information like copies of the agreement at this time. It's not really done until we sign. The U.S. will be giving the agreement to their Congress after they turn it into legislation, and we will give the agreement on our side for OEK review and endorsement. So that is the process. Shown in the agreement totals up to almost 900 million over the course of 20 years. This is significant because it's about 3 times as much as what we received in 2010, and more than twice what we started with when this administration took office. But there are a lot of benefits that are happening outside of the negotiations, and we are not counting those efforts. And then there are additional benefits that also need to be considered. For instance, if this moving the first payment to October this year instead of October next year, it means that we don't have to borrow money or look for other money to replace that money that we're not getting And it also means that the money we're getting is grant money. It's not, we don't need to rely so much on our trust fund to give us that money. And that's important because the market is still a bit soft in terms of the interest rate returns that we're seeing from the COFA trust fund. So the less we can draw from the trust fund, the more we give it a chance to grow again to where it was before we were hit by the weaker market that we're experiencing at present. So the expected money that we're to receive in October, if everything works out on the U.S. side and on the Palau side, should have been $2 million under the current agreement. Because of the consideration of the United States to give us money 1 year early, we should receive $92 million. And if you look at the budget numbers for this year, we're running at about $90 million for the total budget. So this is a very significant amount. The amount includes the economic assistance that we're getting from the United States in the first year. It's around $30 million, and that's $20 million for, as you can see from the MOU, $20 million for economic assistance, operations. Then there's another $5 million for infrastructure, another $5 million for infrastructure maintenance. The U.S. also recognizes the pressure that we have from borrowing so much. Right now we're still at about $90 million. Starting this year, they will give us $10 million a year for 6 years, and that will help pay down our debt. And then the first contribution to the trust fund happens at $50 million. The next contribution is the following year, another $50 million, so a total of $100 million. And those numbers should be in the MOU. So the agreement is significant. But again, there are other things that are happening when we do the bill. When the U.S. does the bill, we expect they will also put in additional support for us, including support for the Veterans Administration. And we also expect that there will be support for continued scholarships from the United States to our students. We also threw in a provision, and this is primarily attributed to the work of Ambassador Kyota, who also has supported us in the negotiation, to allow those people who are in the United States to work without getting a permit from Homeland Security. And this has been a problem that we recognized, and we put a provision in there. The U.S. agreed to help those students or any residents in the United States. Of course, there's other bills that have been done, including like Medicaid access. And there is another bill that they were working on that we discussed with Assistant Secretary Cantor about expanding the coverage of compact impact to Palauans and other FAS citizens throughout the United States. So there are a lot of work that are happening. We have to recognize Mr. Farrow for his help in pushing these initiatives along. And it shows how much presence in the United States can mean to us when we're working on things like this that are related but not necessarily involved in the particular negotiation. I also want to say that we were scheduled to end federal assistance under the compact. So having federal assistance, whatever we're getting now, continue is also a big achievement under this negotiation. We have 1 more year left in the current compact. It ends in 2025. And we will use that time to continue to work on different issues like federal programs, language, and services language, and other items that we have discussed but don't have time to complete. And the main issue is we want to get this agreement in and the budget passed so we can get money in October. So let me stop there. I think that was a lot of information, a lot of numbers thrown out there. Maybe I can ask Minister Matul to embellish a little bit on what I've said. Okay.
On Torbella, dan degal necessary.
Oh,
Du ser el Torbella al di
Sì.
briefing.
Kora di so kan mo otat sa gel buk lu mo so mo tiga buk dinang do to kana wa sa ko mo Nung big day time dinul wase tial al dadu ura negotiation sa lumura edera karam lamen. Isra lomu na. Ang nanging silhuk Rusia madigen men do. Isra lomu sa tial agreement of la sign ni. Ang labol mo ot musel mo huk agreement sa 2010. Awal tial ludo del al time awal del aisois. Elisel. Isra lomu sa silhuk le lodar sa universal last Ibigay traer ra kami mo, ang wala rula isoy saludo da plan skira bariga. Madome seringia sira lomo la do no wal kora ngosko spera to kol raki metilgi bulu kora atitu kora walen yang bigay la kora ulo mesergi da mungaram ko met table muta men moda do ko. Igi da mwe putel kampak tagir el mumregra el aga. Imari sa to kol speng cliff sel kol mrek kampak el mumregra udo. Namle ada tu orang altai bawa sikal tu ular kau orang melmol madalwin melmol mau do dah betrop. Amle klol ada tu orang gelam berigel amlo otil wasitial tu kora pandemi, matu kora lagi deh no slow down ekonomi dengan nomor lederah. Lo kan bin samriget begitu uspiangnya sulu tulol di seragi zagi. Kita dimna kal dimna kita tomeli ya zagi. Milenia world pandemic. No slow down economy. The American Ombe Sergir and Tarawil example Rabul Adal, Tel Hook FAS, Newila economy, the Mara Eral and Batroga pandemic. Segi the Batokara tourism no slow down, and the Tara, Clore for argument to give them again. Lo T Segi the do Renner Gid, Bukida Settle Odisia, against Agid and Mumral Digi. Mugultura Gid Aldadu, Embedala Aldadu Movio, Telomangela Miguel. Masuklah tim berkira Minister Udu. Ulum lembreng la adu atau kora finance nar alsel all tetmu. El al time ingira terus peranges. Mungkin hoki terlalu gis lagi lagi. Nagalnya sebelum sekian berikan. Tak boleh kalau makan lo ulek molo uwi. Ini betul kan ni ya. Amel me moktegani. Amol do atau kora ekonomi makai lagi. Milisi ira government pergi tu mesti ada mudel. Togisi lagi lagi. Dia kat sal baru tu ira dong kita ngar alsel. Mospera to nanya edel wara tau short term liquidity issue kita ablugo mulu asing Amerika la meski ta toklo do ra walel tel agreement ultu da gel nombre tel ngari al agreement as kungo sois prajo sang ngar kita next year ng wadi lerul milyon la $1 andra kampa kita mudel kita mal global set Amerika la genial wasing meski ta otiu milyon moldimu kursel mu otel kontrat kita lerul milyon mo otiu milyon atau Oktober. Aklo tu terletak agreement mawul kadore adani. Ada kalsal timeline lagi. Kita ultira pra timeline ra budgeting proses rambrigen. Aklo tu terletak me MOU dan sign dengan Minister Udu lo rambrigen. Ultira kli ata one placeholder. Sel CBL lo ul bodos perin ngala sela budget ra Biden. Sel submit ra budget ngin mo albi rambrigen. Ita na sohis pra sel segiran tao. Yang bukti saya nangil no initial nangil eli OCE seguid el MOU lo mangela more detail at detail la hospital seludo upload hotel ergi del ang mawul ko murado giler mo sign sel agreement to mangela miguel o hotel morablo al adma pacific especially wa seguid o mangela miguel emna soyus ba sel sel daw ramo manar seludo dar at sa congress la miguel mulo re asula la Jeff Farrow Lauren sel team ergi man nomring lorio na ensure magid real ang awal okmongaran katong natmura al sel vilas na budget rambigen si edel mo kadang mal ngulus pa to ko elite mal confident sure mo kadang mo suludo dal ni okto semo support clear igana migid mo miski ta okmongaran al khler man si edel mo ko gid al huk to le tel blad sel la sil ba akwa di mo segid nganegel bebira direct Ada Veterans Affairs, ang clone issue kita tara ko to club center other belao ngar alsela military American. E pato ko tira narong sa tira adra tuam ngar American dapat in may belao and dapat in may galngeso. Dapat pulo asing kuktigira mga American ang balangeso. Sa tara real bala si sibi, matome sila ara to kora language of the commercial legislation no bon seo tira other belao veterans in balangeso ngar belao. Dire kan to kora scholarships Matkora work permits. Ang other bela o complain ng American ang bring til mo mala a permitted tira uriyo ngo uwid. Bang kadang ultu sa ko kulere la ambassador kita Kyoto. Ngun ngaseo lo tu atto era al sel seguido legislation ngun ngaseo ra adre bela mo bio tertib asil dikmer tamrege le ma work permit. Ndre kan bari atto ra Medicaid di klo tu telela ya sel lo ulul southern ya minister udui al mali sel hu financial package. Diger ro ul to ra grants dollar el al time o pel grants na gel mo ngaseo ra pa government tergit amal mol Ikita nga mutul tarragal do do orang berikan dan degal bol magim gal do model tarragal al sel sel mutul kampa من سبب المرأة سنسجل الترى إذا ممكن قوي ذا الملئة لجل بيبي راتقوي التقوى مسائل ولا شيء سبب سنة كده تعمل على السير مثلا الدو ada kan betul membuat orang ketemu dudet membuat diri mungkin qawgi ذا ممثل أي سيجول مقدم برسجل البريزيدنت كمان yang udah
كهلا ديك عمدا سندري كلو تترى هذا صاد يجل تورا ودود بديك كلو ترمان ممكتكليه سيل اسيستنس البولم مسكيد رابك كراك سيلو المليون ترى امبورتانت ترى هم كلو تترى دو صادري سيل نس كل على لا دلن اوكلا ويسي مسه لو المليون راغو تراك دي كده قدول امريكا لا وسين جيرام لو ترك كلو اول وسين تلا تل دم دس وسين نس كل على لا دلن اوكلا بكراك متلغ ترك كليل وسين يرول باسن ترى بكراك سيغورا افريج رايغان نا امريكا لو ده راك متاسه تيجي يمو سبيرني المرورة باجت متملا تركليل واسه بكراك سلو المليون أول ناسرا أيرول باسنت مثل بومي سيرا سيل بول مرقا لوي راك اتيام لمو لوي اتيول مليون وايشي يسل نيس والديريغا الوكيرا لا ايغاغي دل مينتيننس ليم المليون ادريغا لومو ليم المليون افتر يلو الراك اتيام لا ngariak kalmo with المليون ميرول دارتل تيلان او سيشيل تقوا ديرغل المورسل انفراستراكشر فاند ديرغل ايم المليون ان ماس المو with المليون ميرول دارتل تيلان ما هي وقوم قضا غرو قضا سقد ملا قضا المليون رسل قط الراك يسل ورا المورسل لو بغلن ان قدم لا ملا اقوام ايوال مليون ورا باي تايم سيجي دا ترامله والغن سل ايغال بلا امريغال اغريمنت تريد ديملق سل وسيغا غيرل مرايل مماس لو تيرق سل ارا لا درو سل لو سيسول دا سو دوبلا ابلاري ديرغال مورا تراست فاند لا تراست فاند سل رو ستيا غورا وال انداومنت غدملا لا موديغال السل اوريجينال انتنتا تراست فاند سيغا غدملا سين مول مو ديغارا 2044 سيامله اوريجينال دا سو لا غدملا رولين مو perpetual اول سل 50 مليون الموت 15 مليون ويرو راك امو رولي مو مقبل نغار ايوال دارت المليون نغار الشاتراس فان السوم بو ريتش ايوال دارت المليون السو ايل رولز روا انداومنت مالون سو دخلوا على البربيتوال ادولا سال كلو ايوال باسنت امو لاسري ese امو سبيري هي اسل المرايل مو كلو روفلي غرغريه لنغار الون مل باسنت اون افريج ese كده المرايل مو كلو من بك الرجل سيل اوكسيل لو اسل دولار سري تراس فان دي كده سا مينيموم البدل تبريا 15 مليون دين سيادم لا up to 4% يدي ريغل نغريسل بارت بلا على ريدا ترانسفاند رواسي على سوقو من مريا بقيس امرون ان additional minimum and so ملا 5 million or up to 1.5% ترى ترانسفاند ان let's say 400 million نقول صادره 6 million so نغريغل بلا دوسيس براسل تريبل سو بكتير سومو مريا يدل بقيس امرون امنا سو بكتير سيل مسكلا على درو which I think close changes سيل ايغال ملا امريكا الاجريمنت والميل اويت سيجي ادريغل سيل ملا ولد سولا بلور امريكا لاسي ايغا سيل اورال موم دم دغا يا سولا غورغميو دي سيل فيزيكال كليفا اموديا سيل بريفينغ را يونر الي مال ملا تقليل واسي تيغا افتر بولمريكا ايغال لو يراك ادوسا دا نكسل 20 كوم ادي مو انيشال ايغال قديم المول ورا مال دوليل ورا مال بيت تقول تقوي كده اموري يجل تمدرا a year 40 عندنا كمباكت a year 40 كده الموت المورا ريفيو دي سيل المورا ريفيو كده قدوم مسا يجل ملانغاري hopefully دي قدول سونس دا يجد الملال دي اوريدي ملاموري سيل البيس البلادر اللي مقدر يجد دي مو يجد دي مو ملال سيا I think كلول الوال سبق لا بلور بلا من دغدروت الوجي قاسكلو كذا مورير لسه سلتالبول سلبول مرغا يير 15 كذا مو الجيرو يعني كم مرغا يير دوري كذا مو الجيرو إلا ملا مده كذا مو الجيرو كذا مو سيدرو سيكذا أقوال مليون المرال بدول با ديريغ ترى I think an important thing minister sell every year ملا كذا activate sell economic
Bilateral consultation.
consultation. Mung namo deka do mo year 10 do sa every year do sa mo kada man mol man agel economic issues rida agel ma dram rigela mot mangel sa diwa sel JCML ngari ra bekara mung agel kita umrang sel uktura sel sebakren ra ra blu lo se kada maral budul ger ngari mo sonsa bola bel mot mokrawal mentrid asedra angul ewekli seguida umra lo hace ingira del help radro al lo hace mnamo time and please passer tial minimum wage because under tial agreement kada mo nga Saudi dira government da kasi lo Saudi dira government rest rablo alak makpalaw ni tra dra house hace mla ego di modo claim nga mo kada no dil sani adam kala elway arang liga tadi mo lang temrolang lang song sa te ala rablo belaw so teoría terasa di tengah house rela temal larsel 15 lo hace tendrá mesel hace tiam la motoy me la mal de mir tira se mo pasa tial minimum wage bil direga loral ablur bela mi sulang
Is that it? Good?
Sulay President, Sulay Minister Udoy Kaumat Matul. So my question, President, maybe from what you were saying, I will sell 2% del wal kora ang alir sell. Is that saying contribute to this overall total of $890 million or outside of it?
and sea total why say ul democracy
And then my next question, because this is also subject for U.S. congressional approval, the funding. So how is that coming along? Can you explain that?
maybe we'll have Jeff who is he's here today so let's use his expertise.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you for the question. There were two hearings in Congress this week. One hearing in the House Natural Resources Committee was focused on what China is doing in the Pacific. And most of the discussion was about the importance of the compacts. All of the witnesses, and the witnesses were from academia and other experts in the region, spoke about the essential nature of getting the compacts approved by this Congress before September 30th. Then there was a hearing, I'm a little confused on the dates, whether it was yesterday or the day before, in the Senate, in the Appropriations Committee. And Secretary Blinken of the State Department testified, and Secretary Austin of the Defense Department testified. And they were asked about the importance of the compacts and emphasized that the compacts are vital for the U.S. national security and essential to get approved this year. We've been meeting with the president and the minister when they've come to Washington, with Republicans as well as Democrats. I'm a Democrat, pretty clear. But as the president mentioned, I have Republican partners, including the last Republican chair of the House Foreign Affairs Committee. We haven't met a member of Congress yet who has not agreed that it's important to get this done. Now, I mentioned there's a hearing in the House Natural Resources Subcommittee on Indian and Insular Affairs. The chairwoman is a freshman. She's defeated Lynn Chady, the daughter of the last vice president, Trump's vice president. and she was backed by President Trump and is part of the group in the House of those new members of Congress who are Republican who want to cut the budget. And she was supportive of getting this done. Young Kim is the chairwoman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee on Asia and the Pacific. She's supportive of getting this done. Lindsey Graham is the ranking Republican, the top Republican on the Senate Appropriations Committee on Asia and the Pacific. He said we've got to get the compacts done this year. So, right now, there's a big fight between the president and the Republicans in Congress, particularly the House Republicans, on what we call the debt ceiling, which is really about the budget, with Republicans talking about how the budget has to be cut. And they have a list of cuts that they want to make. Compacts don't appear on that list. I don't know, what will happen with those negotiations. In the end, I think that something will be reached. The president was supposed to go. President Biden was supposed to go to Papua New Guinea. Can't cancel that because of the negotiations. But either Secretary Blinken or Vice President Harris will go in his place. Negotiations will continue, and that will get worked out. So we made, in particular last year, knowing that the House was likely, Democrats had a majority in the House before the last election. And it was pretty clear to me as a Democrat that the Republicans were going to win control of the House. So we made it an effort when the president came in or the minister came in to meet with Republicans to educate them as well and make sure this was viewed as a non-political issue between Democrats and Republicans. This is a national security issue for the United States. So we're, cautiously optimistic about getting this approved. It's a very different situation than existed after 2010. There are other, I can go into detail on that, but it's a very different situation. So I'm optimistic about it. I know Envoy Yoon is as well. He has also been, as I and my partners have been, and he and his team have been going up and talking to the Republicans as well as Democrats in every committee, and finding positive responses as we've explained this. So we're encouraged.
I just want to share that Mr. Farrow was instrumental in getting us those appointments in Washington. And, some of the senators that we met was Lindsey Graham, Senator Manchin. One of the meetings that we had, I was at the Armed Services Committee in the House.
Yeah.
And when we were there at the end of the meeting, and there was many Republicans in that room, they said, well, how much do you need? We sent $1 billion to Ukraine last week. Well, they were ready to act. And that congressman actually came to visit us.
Yes.
On one of those congressional visits. So
Republican from Texas.
Republican from Texas.
Yeah.
So, seguid the swira other American lo setia priority is share the Democrats and Republicans are missing wise. Kadomara lo sen tribal ngoda atmosphere American el time sel sera dollar compactara sel agreement 2010. Hoy ngaria mondara yosang ang rablu American. Di sel todos los pering aruba se cautiously optimistic do. Dia do seng guarantee ding se do seng tribal maluwila teal.
Sir President, Minister, you mentioned about that $90 million. So, is the $50 million half of the $100 million that goes to the trust fund is part of that $90 million?
Yes, yes, it is. And I said 92 because the U.S. is also willing to give us what they're supposed to give us this year, which is $2 million. So, I mean, they're being very generous to us.
Basically, the agreements overlap, and they will honor the other agreement, pay that out, yeah.
Mal misaule president ma minister ma igal malungil information am nato. Question kami mention la sa tiada kal require ratification na ngira belaw. Hindi lesson nombre kal sa 2010 natin na kal ratify. Hindi kung natin la kal testeri rap to kal Senate o President Senator Eli maring ako al demand ringi along guk team net timing schedule ang ul mga ngariabol affect ringi talurere man ako.
I think there's several issues I want to mention sa information or all. Di kita, of course, kita selda nga negotiation, hindi kal maturuak na tukon, hindi kal sa dollar si. Tara ula meeting sales initially ngamle schedule dara 8 o'clock. Hindi kami rala المول مرة خصوص خصوص الالي مسرابول مريكسل الدو يقدر لما سبعه دلوا سي اوكي لابوريا ميتينغ لما ترادرو البيرا قالوا يدو اي ستيرا ديتيل ديال الاجريمنت البوضه بعد ساينغري سيا عمل مقتن دي رادرا سينت ار اندرستاندينغ او كنانيا يمورا ميتينغ البيل سكيجولينغ او سيسيل تايم may goro nito sa kalel si goro cancel tira mending to sa tia meeting mo tira rubukul bela lagi dire kan invite rubukul bela ding lo de kal si ilme ding nan wil te al ambassador yun am larse mo si loger agering nya mal mlongin mga taklil wa sa tia al tia dal wil rida tia plana mo sa tia di mol ya lol mol bengire lam rigel merate bole ukharel baskin dekal girel medep ese amne klo tu trel am sa mo oy adra senat tamar dim la destrir di senator bawla sa kudur kla senator inabol lego of course nge adra oy sen min se tetora udo ka se helpling ge damma information man mo shelom tri rogoy ang go to tulel agim tel question o ase ratification ng require dia ka adire kable discussion ra ase ragim ngara meeting ng teatro albire eli ma kita deka dolot ring tel tulwiler ye sel kisera dra amrigel me sois brablur belaw adim el mol le sera da ngwa kampak trawole le tiawadi lol mol mel deka awna bangalel sel bodolo daringi amamla amrigel amoski dangeso maulen require ablur amrigel pasara la le tegamo top daudol amoski daudol kita dimo receive mang di close to trela ulen ambassador no kora mil kora se wila ratifying another belo ngari sel kora tlabogol toy tlabogol sel da se adrablur belaw olbira blur belaw lomtera adrablur belaw adirigal oeng ertial toy mang kada dirigal malonito ase ulgu maigal sel plan ngaigal information ro koy sel final agreement bol sa ni PNG di mo kadi mo mregal sa ni kapiamo ele ndigal se del release ra kapi until kada sa hopefully after say that temesang sil this pass resolution ase kada oeng artial to koy kora di mo adoli ada
Malungila ti kada pala perseya Minister, you said that we haven't we still have 1 more year left on this, the older compact. So we can, there's still discussion on other other issues, federal programs. So if this agreement is signed next month in Papua New Guinea, I'm assuming it's next week in Papua New Guinea, will that close this thing, or is it still, we can still have, I mean,
Thank you, Lei. The current agreement ends next year, so we still have time to continue to discuss, and we need to discuss some of those details on federal programs that require a document to be included in there. But the U.S. has committed in the agreement that we're working on now that existing programs will continue. So we do have time. This doesn't close the door on those continued discussions. And in the compact, like the President said, we do have annual discussions, and we can always ask the United States to sit at the table and to discuss any continued assistance, which is also built into the language.
Let me just give Mr. Farrow an opportunity to share a little bit more about the significance of this agreement and where we are. So
as the President mentioned, I go back to the original negotiation of the compact. I was right out of school. It was the first thing I worked on in the White House. And here I am many years later. That was 1979 when I started this, and it's 2023. This is the most significant change in the relationship that has occurred since the original negotiation. And the reason is the following. The original conception of the United States and the negotiation was, we're going to give Palau a certain amount of money, endow a trust fund, and after 50 years, Palau would be responsible for itself and be self-supporting. And what this agreement does is say that, and at the same time, Palau is going to let the United States have strategic denial, which means control over its borders with respect to other countries, and land rights in perpetuity. That was an unbalanced relationship. And as we discussed it with Envoy Yoon, he understood that. And so what this agreement says is that we're going to be, the U.S. is going to be providing assistance for as long as can be anticipated. This is a 20-year commitment, although there's another review due in 10 years, when if this amounts, or if there are other needs that are not worked out in the annual reviews are done, then there'll be another negotiation in 10 years. But Envoy, you made the point yesterday that 20 years from now, this automatically renews if both governments want to renew it. So that's 40 years. And so instead of Palau having to rely on the trust fund to replace U.S. assistance, the U.S. will be providing assistance for as long as Palau is assisting the U.S. strategically. And it makes the relationship more equitable. And it's a totally different concept than the original concept of the negotiations. I have to add this as well. The President came to Washington, and he met with Secretary Blinken of State, Secretary Austin of Defense, Secretary Holland of Interior, John Feiner, Deputy National Security Advisor, the Director of the CIA, and others. And he shocked Secretary Blinken, I have to tell you the truth, because Secretary Blinken had been told, oh, the negotiations are going fine, and This is not going to be a courtesy call and a nice visit. And the president said, this deal is unacceptable. And Blinken was shocked. And we're not going to negotiate on the basis of this. The deal that was worked out in 2020 was for $432,722,000 over the 20-year period. This agreement is $550 million more than that. And it was important that the president tell the truth to the U.S. government. And then, as Minister Dewey will recall, the U.S. negotiator at the time, who was a career State Department ambassador, before that happened, the president will remember meeting with Secretary Holland, and right after the meeting, the career U.S. ambassador, who was the U.S. negotiator at the time for the State Department, said, you have to understand, this is all that the U.S. government can do. We can't provide any more money than that $432 million. And the president said, I don't know if you'll get upset that I quote him, if that's the case, there's no reason for us to talk to you anymore. And so that's why I brought up with Minister Dewey. So she's, the ambassador sought to have a negotiating meeting with us by video. I think it was September 1st or something of that year.
21.
Just, 21, just a month or so after the president had been there. And we talked about it. We agreed, okay, we'll take the meeting. And they said, okay, let's start negotiating. Here's what was agreed to in 2020. You know, what do you want to change and so forth. And the minister said, the president was just in Washington. He was very clear. This is unacceptable. This is not a basis for starting a negotiation. We're going to have to start fresh. And they made every effort to try to force the president to, and when I say they, people in the U.S. government, to try to force the president to resume negotiations that had been conducted in 2020. And the president decided, no, we're not going to do that with the same people, with the same offer. And finally, the president was flying through Washington. And I called at home the Deputy National Security Advisor, who I knew from the Clinton White House, and said, if you want these negotiations to prosper, we're going to have to do things differently. I want you to meet with the president when he's going to be just flying through Washington, just here for the day. And we had that meeting. The president was very frank with him. Did was he called Joseph Yun, who had just retired. Yun had been the special negotiator for North Korea to negotiate with Kim Jong-un. And I won't comment on president or whatever he is, Yun's mental state and so forth. But it was a difficult person to negotiate with. And so Yun was he's an economist, a top negotiator of the state of the U.S. government, and he was looking forward to doing other things. And Kurt Campbell, the Deputy National Security Advisor, said, Joe, I really need you to straighten this out. And he came back And we spent long hours with the minister and the president and Yoon explaining what the situation was, what had happened to Palau's economy, because Palau refused to buckle under to China's pressure to switch recognition from Taiwan to China because of COVID, what the needs were, and he was very thoughtful. We negotiated, they were tough negotiations, as the minister mentioned. We were negotiating language up until the night before the initialing, because we had to, on this trip, there were 3 State Department lawyers and a lawyer from the Interior Department arguing over every word, and Lauren was there, and we, and Elway, Director Gaeta was, he wasn't taxing them, but he was part of those discussions as well, and with the minister, and we had to hash out and argue over every word, but that was essential to getting this done. You have to know when to say no and when to say yes. And we, of course, we wanted more, but we knew the point at which the United States was not going to go past, but we also knew the point that they could go to. And so that's why this is more than twice as much as what had been negotiated before. It's more than 3 times. If you take the last 2010 agreement and extend it, which is a 15-year agreement, and extend it to 20 years, this is almost 3 times what was provided then. That's not a criticism of 2010 from my point of view, because I helped in 2010. The circumstances are different. The U.S. and China were not in the same situation in 2010. And so there was only so far they could be pushed. The U.S., the compact was negotiated. The U.S. nobody was concerned about China at all. The U.S. was concerned about the Soviet Union. And then the Soviet Union dissolved, and the U.S. felt, okay, we don't have to worry about the Pacific anymore. And the Chinese, I remember at the time they were talking about the 900-ship Soviet Navy in the original negotiations, but there was no more. So there was very little focus on the Pacific. The president had the wisdom and the courage and the strength to tell the highest ranking officials of the U.S. government no, and that things had to be done better. And we were fortunate, the geopolitical situation helped. We were fortunate to have a White House that understood and was responsive, and ultimately, and then the president asked for a presidential envoy, because the previous State Department negotiator was not a bad person. She just did not have the stature within the U.S. government to get the White House, to get the Defense Department, the President's Office of Management and Budget, and others to change what they would allow her to do. And we wanted a presidential envoy who would be speaking in the name of the President of the United States, who could tell the Budget Office and others, we're going to have to do this. This is in our national security interest. So, again, the main point I want to make is it's a historic change in what the relationship is. And it sets the pattern, and I know Envoy Yoon believes this, as long as the Palau is helping the United States keep a free and open Indo-Pacific and plays a vital role in that. The United States has an obligation to help Palau economically. And we've changed from the original idea, we'll give them some money, then they're off on their own, to a more balanced relationship. That's what we've accomplished, the President and the Minister have accomplished in these negotiations. So I'm very proud personally to have started on this and getting close to the end of my career. And so I don't know if I'll be around for the 40th, to help. I would certainly try. I know there are people like Lauren and Elway, and the minister and others who will be there, even if I'm not involved. But we have changed, fundamentally changed this arrangement, and it's not going to go back in reverse. It can only go better. 40th anniversary, if there are things are economically still as bad as they are in Palau, as they have been, tourism doesn't recover quickly enough. The United States is going to have to think about, okay, we're going to have to be further responsive to Palau. And we have in year 50, which the current compact doesn't call for, we have a negotiation essentially on an automatic renewal at the same level of funding that's being provided now. So there's $20 million a year now for budgetary assistance, as opposed to zero for budgetary assistance right now, other than taking money from the trust fund. And by then, it'll be over 29 million. And we'll start from the basis, instead of starting from zero, Palau will start from 29 plus $1 million. We've finally made the relationship more equitable and balanced. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Farrow, for that. That claims that part of history that and how the negotiation happened. Information that you cannot find on the public domain, except for like MOU and stuff like that you can find. So I have a question, maybe for you or for the chief negotiator, because you touched a bit on it. Today we live in this cloud of heated rhetoric and geopolitical tensions. United States, China comes into play, Taiwan, North Korea. So how big of a factor was that contributed to the overall the outcome of the overall negotiations?
It was a big factor. In 2010, as I mentioned, in 2010, the United States wasn't concerned. In the original negotiations, we had the trusteeship. The main pressure was to end the trusteeship. There were 11 trusteeships set up after World War II. 10 of the trusteeships had ended, and the territories had become nations, and the 11th was the trust territory of the Pacific Islands, and there was pressure from the UN because the original commitment of the U.S. was to develop these islands into independence. And after a while, the United States realized we don't really want them to be fully independent. So the United States first tried to convince the islands to become a territory of the United States, which is really what the Northern Marianas District opted to do. And then the U.S., particularly the U.S. Senate, was saying, we're not going to give up these islands. We fought and bled for them in World War II, so we need to keep our strategic rights. And then the United States promoted the idea of, okay, we'll make you a sovereign nation, but in return, you'll give us strategic rights. And so that's what was done. And yes, timing is, in politics, timing is everything. And we benefited from being at the right time. Now, the United States views that with the Soviet Union, people were concerned about war. It's not as much war in the military sense with China, but it's an economic competition. And, Palau controls an area of the Western Pacific. It's EEZ, the air above it. It's nearly as large as the state of Texas, adjacent to the Philippines and Indonesia. These are vital shipping lanes for China. And so China knows it and would like to change Palau's association with the United States. And the United States knows that it's essential, again, for keeping a free and open Indo-Pacific. Because the United States, wants there to be free transit through these waters. But is a little bit suspicious of China, what China might do so yes, we benefited from the timing, and the president knew that this was the time to move. I can't tell you, that China and the U.S. are trying to lessen tensions between one another. And so a few years from now, the geopolitical situation might be different. So we benefited. It was the right time to make the demands that were made to get the U.S. to focus. And the president had the wisdom to take advantage of that, had the wisdom to designate the Minister of Finance, who is very meticulous and really understood what the budgetary needs and economic needs of Palau are, and to help craft the details of what this agreement is.
Thank you.
Mr. President, thank you, Mr. I just have two simple questions. I'm speaking English, so you can see if you have any insight on this. I think Guam and Hawaii are losing the impact funding of the compact impact for the COFA citizens. Do you know of any, if there's any support for them getting that funding back, or there's a Compact Impact Fairness Act that was introduced into Congress?
Let me explain this. And I went from the Carter White House to the Congress, and there were concerns in Guam, in particular, about the impact of the free migration, which is one of the most important parts of the free association of the compact, was that people from Palau and the other freely associated states would be able to live in U.S. areas. And so the Compact Impact Program was created to help provide financial support. But what we realized, and this is our initiative from Palau, we went that, first of all, most of the people who are going to work, and they're paying taxes, and they're contributing to the economy, they're contributing to the labor force, and they're essential to the economies of the communities to which they go. So, but what we recognized was that the individuals who are moving, because of what was called welfare reform in 1986, FAS citizens were unintentionally disqualified from social programs. And when COVID hit, we recognized there was the opportunity, because of concern about health, to get Medicaid restored for citizens of the freely associated states. It was our initiative, and we went to Congressman Case of Hawaii and Senator Hirono of Hawaii and proposed this idea, and they sponsored the legislation, and so Medicaid was restored. And then we knew once we had that done, there were other social programs from which freely associated state citizens had been disqualified in the 1996 welfare reform. So what's called the Compact Impact Fairness Act, what's fair about it, it's a little bit of a misnomer. It's using compact impact, but what the real point of that legislation is to qualify Palauans and Micronesians and Marshallese who live in the states for the various social programs, so that those people who need help in communities will get help, and they won't be a burden to those communities. And I would also have to say, we'll see what happens, and I expect that to be part of the Biden administration's legislative package to approve the compacts. And then I think we may see Congress add more money on for communities, but it's become very difficult because now it's not just Guam and the Northern Marianas and Hawaii where people are living. There are people living in Arkansas. There are people who are living in, Oregon. Envoy Yoon was talking about his son's best friend. His girlfriend is a Palauan. So, there are a lot of communities now where people from the freely associated states live. And this will treat them as they should be treated. And as I said, 1996 was really an oversight to exclude them. But it took a long time to get things done sometimes.
Presidente Morgan di Tiagora, Yamara, Sensor Mumble, Ayaga, between Megri, Tiswala qualifying healing, Saludo Swella, Ruba Pase, Adaman Nila Yakari, Elangania Wasina, Marwa Soltal, Mirbella, Level Seven, and the promise Saludo, the Mura Marshall, Mamora FSM, was Selam Tamila billions, Telal billions, Sagedi Milara, I was also a billion. Is it fair sel dollar niya bang?
Ngande kalau sisi ruba kalau dia sel lagam change ar negotiator ngaram kogera adaram rigel. Ngangora amne sola dia ngar sel 432 million. Akora dia sisi ruba kan dia. Okay, so it's never enough. Sel dollarnya it's never enough. Andi al sumun sodan mo kampera il dois rarat mawa di sira udo de dingilu e kita ngino to klor tigal rogoi meng oi siadar mlogo waseng makit ndi kita ali nakato bes kita unmu ngara 2 million e giren mo chero oise kada maltia de sura amrigel waseng namo dakato Marcelo hace cada graduate moderno laudo. Se ala goto klol impactel el bodo me seguir ang armada dan maralme. Oi, diga songos di agumra lo hace mal cloa al sebo clear klangaria dar other belo. Di sogal dula sa tara lo me seguir ablo american. Gida sel agreement el plol kengeni american lo banget. Amal di kaya bel agreement, ndilu el pages. Aigel baby rablu atti bel magamang ala aigel ngokrok rai apa bilir letil كذا سيل نغرا دلويل سوم غدا كذا قاسب أكل قاسوسو يمرو لا تقول الديريق الأوتيل واسيجي أمرو لانغر عليه. And I'll just use an example. واسي director of BGST أمرو لانغر عليه. Say part cell, you know, part of nation building. أبلور أمريكا 4 years واسي نجيري adapt تيجي economic policies help programmil لولا بلومين مم سيسي. من سوري لو سوري أبلول لو مصريين is in the right direction. Mang aktinu tu mo makatakli. Sila ko tuklaw tutrel, dabaya askara government tangar alet. May mga liter adro alula sem pasara minimum wage do ni alula sem borado nga sa ududira adro belaw. The helper tir siya ba gira den muruni ela. Ela kadam mo, ela kadam nasmi audo del maran me, kadam la sumaklia tax system rin. Ela kita dia sikro ase another lower makara mo wala drang clear makara make sure a retirees ang kanya program artil every year hindi kan barang mababaw dudil nga sa clear ala drang ok ay gadi nga ramdal olbire al time ro ko im aktimo ko ansulang oh
Minister Jenkins, we're coming to the end of the school year, so when you're graduation at school, you're going to be camera after your first year of
thank you
implementing the round system.
Okay. Fortunately, I didn't have to negotiate this with the United States. Thank you for the question, Lei. Graduation for the high school will be June 22nd. Promotion for the elementary schools will be held the week prior to that, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday of the same week. Let me see, the Peleliu, Angara, and Kayango will be on Monday, Bubbled Up will be on Tuesday, and Koror schools will be on Wednesday of the 18th, 19th, and 20th, or 21st, 22nd. June.
Not May.
Not May. Yeah, that's part of the year-round calendar. Makes that change. Now the private schools are continuing with their own calendars, so they will be having individual promotions and graduations as they seem fit. So that's one change. We will be beginning our next school year on July 12th. So it's a 3-week summer break, pretty much the same as what we had planned out.
Just one more. So back to the compact. But no, this is so we have that $100 million for the trust fund. So did you run any projections at the end of the 20th year period? If you put that in addition to the existing trust fund, how much would we have at the end of the 20th year? 1 billion.
So the trust fund is our fund. Let me first say that. So it's up to us to work to grow it, to find as much money as we can to put in it and not to take out as much, right? So the faucet needs to be running more than the drain, and that's up to us. So we did do some projections. Right now, we are taking money out of the trust fund. That's what we are using. That's why we only talk about 2 million is what we're getting, right? So the idea in this negotiation was the U.S. will give us money so we don't have to take out of the trust fund. If we do take out of the trust fund, which is up to us, we know what the outcome will be. But it doesn't stop us from looking for money from other places. The U.S. as a good partner will support us to ask other people to contribute to our fund. But we shouldn't rely on our savings. That's just one source of funding for the Republic. We should look at other options like savings bonds or other debt instruments, which is something that we've passed a law regarding to allow us to do that. But we also have other contributions from other people, and then we need to build our private sector. If you want to focus on one thing, it's the private sector to grow our economy so our people can stay here and have opportunity. Well, it's really hard to do that when we're relying on the trust fund and the market is going up and down, tourism is going up and down. So a lot of the structure of the assistance that we get from the United States recognizes that. So there is a short term, which is why they give us assistance 1 year early and why they give us money to pay down our debt. And then there is the long-term assistance that focuses on giving us money every year so we don't worry too much about disasters and about tourism going up and down, and lets us work on developing digital residency and other fintech initiatives, improving services and other opportunities for Palauans so they can stay here, help us build our country. So that's kind of the perspective that we took. And, yes, the trust fund is important. For our situation, it's a very good buffer for some of the volatility as well as climate shocks, which is why we added additional crisis money, additional 5 or 1.5% of the fund. But we allow it to grow. That's something that's on us. And we have control over that.
Ona kari mura minister bi malu minister ngirai. Bulis agora agora TV musada close arail. Kira la mara so kabe so di sem. Polo dinga ada bulu to ka di la randi.
Kam koram katakla karim to close ringi logi wangaral.
Tengara nasional musada mo close ara sa dia sa September ma umal.
O man. Tal to ko ka kadangar sa ringi merti amliwal al mergi makada. Kada tilbil logi wa akamitira tial mga tumokra omal maraton ra June 4th ewal ko singil ongelon malbuy lulwasya kada momru la skira el almor mutersay etel gibolom katakril morabuay lwasya padong at mokortiang atokora a safety ma security ra adrablu agirelo de swal mang kadangaringia maral po the close el partraral Endi ul kada meruringi ada kada maksaw, hindi kada maksaw ar adrablu mal obeda maktakra tele ti alrurt. Kardire kalungi la polo la kalu ulay gayi del rurt. Elwa la ka looti aklabul gul mal uben kladru lel dire kan merablu bela. In soada rogul adan mo partering au ul tangara era mga rel bela malas mulong katakringa sa kada makarangi rogul adan mo supporter tiang. Akabiti di imadala akabalmente gida ma presidente ma leadership gida mga mokraudor endi tianga kados be anya soraro kuil adrebelaw el mogut maklile sel tobda ay sel gidel tial omal marathon en isela blur belaw ndakal isela minister obiang al ubeng betur presidente ntang isela blur belaw tianga soadal makataknim na makataklia minister matula chairman ramam Alwaset yang akatengel marathon el merablur belaw el register del marathon certified mate mir ma recorder tir tial mo mokra al selablur belaw asi il mo spera ikel marathon el ngaray kel belaw malubengi diligera makadolingi traungil klang sora ablu el girela y gallita dongot mokla el malasam lom kataklo aseng makarapa da kanya sew resegi del silsa sulang ngayon siya la moro gira ro kulger kaul girel tiang
Tia moram la mombre garo gulger. Two things that are happening alang National Police Week ara tiam lombre gal week.
We're still in it.
Oh, we're still in it, sorry. So other more recognized trial uk police ngara PCC rel al time. The forum na graduate. Ngara team ngara cohort program rela. O trial foral digam na graduate tabod higher tier. Material ngara cohort program aurior ngara school. Ngara mawad sebalt junior sumor Kayla Reblu, Tumakreng Johannes, ma Sabino Kyorta Junior.
Bigyan na honor roll.
Oh,
Students
sa PCC cohort na program. The 11 na ro ko tigil 5 na ano.
Oh, tiga 5 lang ana role.
Yes.
Relal.
Recognize them.
Normal, congratulate tire, kasi keep up the hard work. Dirigal Kluguk, Vice Minister, is Teachers Appreciation Day. Oh, kada malaw litra arbek el parents, mga ka school. Oh, show appreciation to your teachers and gotten mring lura the sensei. Tara yelura lebera tam klong role mergid, klong mondal mergid underappreciated, I say. Mang melakaba obeser tirma mring lura rabek kalsis. I say wala, hindi ka ngaralista na kami na wasit yan. Oh, why same, na nurses te.
EMT.
Nurses ma EMT. Last week, same last week, yeah. So, kadamaral, kadangara, again, mal critical at sila compact. You know, tela compact agreement, again, although I can make assistant, mal specified. Education, so teachers, healthcare, and security. So, and dito lang ito climate change. So, so lang reminder, trial uka. Tuko bet sils, tira al sils. Iwan mo total na press conference mo. Milo ukte organize trial, tira mo rin loro rapakal sils, uka, burder tira al sils. And of course, all the ones this week and the last week. Di gaya tanga kare al sils. Harvey Tagiasi, oh, ngara MOJ, Jordan Ewat, ngara MOF, Immigration, yes. Natasha Tele, ngara MOE, Ria, yeah, Ria Rulu ko ngara MHHS. Ngaraman mga sulir, wish them a very happy birthday. Do ni trak lang tangat mora pekla adar bela ma belu adar belu bela kuman sulang manex magi mora PNG. Oh, I think I've said that enough already. I'll be back next Tuesday. Okay, sula. Dan dari tele dengan sel flight look return.
Okay, ataluay si tiagili among lubang lela press conference rikid. Makuk next LCL.